Have you ever been in the middle of a conversation and suddenly the other person checks out, goes silent, pulls back, disappears emotionally? That moment hits hard. Your brain races to figure out what went wrong. But here's the truth. How you respond in that silence defines your strength. This isn't about chasing them down. It's about standing your ground. Because the real power, it's not in forcing connection. It's in knowing how to hold your peace when someone else walks away. Let's talk about how to handle it with clarity, calm, and confidence. When someone disengages in the middle of a conversation, goes silent, pulls back emotionally, stops responding, it can feel like a rejection. That shift in energy is often so sudden that it knocks the air right out of you. One moment you're in the flow of communication, and the next you're left staring at a wall of silence. The natural response for most people is to react quickly, to fill the gap, to chase clarity, to push for connection. But here's the truth. Rushing into that void rarely leads to resolution. In fact, it often makes things worse. That moment of emotional detachment from the other person is not a signal to speed up. It's a call to slow down, to pause, not to retreat forever, but to intentionally step back and get quiet enough to understand what's actually happening beneath the surface. Because so often our instincts in moments like these are fueled by emotion, not wisdom. And emotional urgency has a way of clouding judgment. We think, if I don't say something now, I'll lose them. Or, if I don't fix this right away, it'll spiral. But more often than not, when we react in that state, we're not fixing, we're forcing. The pause is not passive, it's powerful. It's you taking ownership of your emotional state before letting the moment dictate your response. It's the space where emotional clarity gets to breathe. In the pause, you give yourself a chance to separate what's yours from what's theirs. You might be feeling abandoned, confused, even angry. That's valid, but your job in that space is to meet those emotions with awareness, not with action, because without that self-check, your next move may be driven by fear or ego, not understanding. In conflict or high-emotion conversations, silence from the other side often triggers old wounds. It brings up memories of being dismissed, overlooked, or rejected. That's why it feels so intense. But when you rush to close the gap, you're often not speaking from the present, you're reacting from the past. The pause lets you notice that. It gives you time to process, to ask yourself, is this about what's happening now, or about what I've experienced before? That insight is critical because it turns you from someone reacting impulsively to someone responding intentionally. And during that pause, you also offer something deeply valuable to the other person: space. Sometimes people disengage not out of malice or disrespect, but because they're overwhelmed, flooded, or simply unsure of how to proceed. Giving them breathing room might be exactly what allows them to return, when they're ready and when it can be productive. By choosing not to pursue in that heated moment, you show emotional discipline. You're not ignoring the issue, you're protecting the integrity of the conversation. Because any words spoken in a storm are likely to be carried by the wind, not heard with clarity. Taking a pause also sends a message. I respect both of us enough not to make things worse. That kind of presence speaks louder than any desperate explanation or pressured demand. In fact, one of the most disarming things you can do in a moment of tension is nothing at all, at least not immediately, not to manipulate, not to punish, but to gather yourself, to me. Make sure your next move is aligned with your values, not your vulnerabilities. Many people think strength is loud, fast, aggressive, but true strength is restraint. It's being able to sit with discomfort without letting it control you. It's recognizing that your dignity doesn't require you to chase anyone, prove anything, or fill every silence. It's knowing that walking calmly through tension doesn't mean you're giving up, it means you're growing up. That pause becomes the boundary between reaction and regret. And while you're in that pause, You're not doing nothing. You're doing the inner work. You're checking your assumptions. Are you telling yourself a story that may not be true? Are you assuming the worst because that's what you're used to? Are you trying to fix something because uncertainty makes you anxious? Those questions don't come from self-doubt. They come from self-inquiry. They're a sign that you're stepping into awareness instead of drama. A pause doesn't mean you'll never speak. It means when you do speak, it'll come from a place of balance, not chaos. It means that your words will carry weight instead of pressure. It means that your intention will be clear, not clouded by panic. And that clarity has the power to shift the entire tone of the conversation, whether it continues or ends. Even if the other person doesn't re-engage, the pause protects your peace. It ensures that your side of the communication reflects your maturity, not your emotion in the moment. You don't need to convince, corner, or correct someone into hearing you. Sometimes the most respectful thing you can do is say nothing right now and everything later, once the ground is steady again. There will always be a temptation to fill silence, but not every silence is a problem. Some silences are teachers. They show you where you're still reactive. They show you how deeply you trust yourself. And most importantly, they show you who you are when the other person steps back. That's where the real growth happens, not in the comfort of control, but in the courage to pause without losing your center. When someone disengages, the silence can feel louder than words. A conversation that was once flowing hits a wall, and suddenly you're left with a question mark hanging in the air. It's natural to start replaying every moment, every word, looking for what you did wrong. The human mind is wired to find meaning, even in the absence of information. And when there's no explanation given, we create our own stories. Most of the time, those stories are not kind to ourselves. They whisper, "You said too much," or "You were too emotional," or worse, "You're not worth their time." But here's the truth. Someone's silence, withdrawal, or emotional distance is not a measure of your value. It's a reflection of their own state, what they're feeling, fearing, or trying to manage internally. The moment you begin to internalize their behavior as evidence of your own inadequacy, you give away your power. You start anchoring your self-worth to someone else's emotional availability, and that's a fragile foundation because people are inconsistent, people get overwhelmed, people shut down, not because you're unworthy, but because they don't know how to stay present in discomfort. We live in a world that teaches us to seek validation from others. Approval becomes a currency we chase. When someone disengages, it can feel like a form of emotional debt. They've taken something from us: attention, acknowledgement, connection. But you are not bankrupt just because they walked away. That feeling of being less than is often a conditioned response, not a true reflection of the moment. Disengagement might have nothing to do with you, but if you turn it inward, it can begin to erode your sense of self from the inside out. The key is to recognize that emotional separation does not equal personal rejection. Silence is not always about offense, it's oft, and about overwhelm. People disengage for countless reasons: stress, fear of confrontation, emotional immaturity, or simply being unequipped to process hard conversations. If you take that disengagement personally every time, you'll end up carrying emotional weight that was never yours to hold. And it's heavy. You can feel it in your chest, in your stomach, in that tight space in your throat where unspoken feelings sit. But just because you're feeling it doesn't mean it's your fault. When you stop internalizing someone else's withdrawal, you begin to reclaim your emotional independence. You start to realize that you can feel disappointed without being defeated, that you can acknowledge someone's disconnection without letting it unravel your sense of identity. You stop asking, "What did I do wrong?" and start asking, "What do I need right now to stay grounded?" That shift in questioning is profound. It moves you from blame to balance, from fixation to freedom. And this doesn't mean you ignore the emotional impact. It's okay to feel hurt. It's okay to feel confused or even angry. But there's a difference between feeling your emotions and letting them define you. When someone disengages and you start spiraling inward, pause and ask, whose emotion is this really? Is it yours? Or are you absorbing someone else's discomfort and turning it into a story about your inadequacy? The most dangerous part of internalizing disengagement is how silently it shapes your behavior. You start to shrink, you walk on eggshells, you avoid expressing needs for fear of pushing people away. You begin to tiptoe around conflict, suppressing your truth just to keep others from leaving. And in that process, you start abandoning yourself. The irony is, you're so afraid of being disconnected from others that you end up disconnecting from yourself. But you don't need to do that. You can stay rooted. You can stay whole. You can remind yourself that someone stepping back emotionally is not a verdict on your value. It's simply data, information that tells you why here they are, not who you are. And when you stop interpreting someone else's absence as a reflection of your presence, you begin to see the bigger picture. You begin to recognize that people are responsible for how they show up, just as you are responsible for how you interpret their absence. One of the most liberating things you can do in a moment of disengagement is to draw a line between empathy and ownership. You can care without carrying. You can notice the shift in someone's energy without letting it destabilize yours. That boundary doesn't make you cold, it makes you clear. It allows you to show up with compassion for others and commitment to yourself. Because empathy without boundaries turns into self-erasure. And the moment you stop internalizing, you free yourself to respond instead of react. You can check in with the other person when the time feels right, but not out of desperation, out of grounded concern, not emotional chaos. You can ask, is there something going on? Or, do you need space? Not to fix, not to force, but to clarify. And if they're not ready to respond, that's okay too, because you're no longer hinging your peace on their participation. Not every conversation will be resolved. Not every person will have the capacity to meet you where you are. But you can still choose how to show up for yourself. You can still choose to believe that your worth is not on trial just because someone else went quiet. You can choose to stay steady, even when the other person pulls away. There's strength in not making their silence louder in your own head. There's power in holding your space without demanding someone else step back into it. When you refuse to internalize disengagement, you're no longer waiting to be chosen, you're choosing yourself. And that's not selfish, that's healing. Because when you stop taking responsibility for someone else's you finally start hearing your own voice again. When someone disengages, it can feel like you're left in a one-sided conversation, emotionally stranded. The energy shifts, the connection fades, and suddenly you're speaking into a void. In those moments, it's easy to let frustration take the wheel. It's tempting to demand answers, to push, to confront with sharpness, because silence feels like a form of punishment. But if the goal is reconnection, not control, then the way you approach that silence matters deeply. The tone, the timing, and the intention behind your response are everything. Leading with curiosity instead of accusation is the difference between deepening a relationship and damaging it. When someone emotionally pulls back, they're already in a vulnerable state, whether they show it or not. They may be overwhelmed, unsure, or simply afraid to say the wrong thing. Approaching them with accusation only adds weight to what they're already carrying. It makes the space feel unsafe. Defensive walls go up, minds close, hearts shut down, and then it becomes even harder to bridge the gap. Curiosity, on the other hand, invites dialogue without pressure. It sounds like, hey, I noticed you got quiet. Everything okay? Instead of, why are you ignoring me? It carries softness. It offers space for the other person to share what's real for them. It communicates, I care more about understanding than being right. That's a powerful message because it doesn't corner someone, it meets them. When you lead with curiosity, you're choosing to respond with openness rather than ego. You're saying, I'm here and I'm listening, instead of, I need you to explain yourself right now. That difference may seem subtle, but emotionally, it's huge. One opens a door, the other builds a wall. And most people can feel that difference instantly. Whether spoken aloud or through body language, the energy behind your approach either invites someone closer or pushes them further away. It's important to check your emotional state before hang out. Are you grounded, or are you trying to soothe your own discomfort by pulling them back into engagement? If your outreach is based on anxiety or fear, it may come out sounding like control. But when you pause and center yourself first, your words can carry calm. That calm is magnetic. It helps others feel safe. And safety is what encourages people to re-engage after they've shut down. Curiosity also creates space for discovery. You might think you know why someone is pulled away, but assumptions are often wrong. Maybe you believe they're upset with you, but really they're struggling with something unrelated. Maybe their silence isn't rejection, it's regulation. Maybe they're trying not to say something they'll regret. When you come in hot with accusation, you don't get to uncover those truths. You only add fuel to a fire you don't yet understand. Even if their disengagement is related to something you've said or done, approaching with curiosity creates an environment where that can be addressed constructively. It gives both of you a chance to speak honestly without spiraling into blame. It allows for mutual understanding, not mutual defense. And when conflict is met with curiosity instead of combat, relationships deepen. Trust is built not because everything is easy, but because both people know the hard moments can be navigated with care. Tone matters, not just the words, but how you say them. A soft tone doesn't mean weakness, it means emotional intelligence. It shows you're not trying to win, you're trying to understand. That's a form of leadership in personal relationships. You're modeling what it looks like to stay open, even when things feel uncertain. That openness often gives others permission to lower their guard and come forward too. Timing also plays a role. Curiosity doesn't always mean addressing things immediately. Sometimes the most HTFL approach is waiting, not indefinitely, but until you've both had a moment to process. Rushing to resolve can feel like pressure. Giving a little space before reaching out allows the conversation to begin from a place of intention, not tension. Then when you do check in, it's with a clear heart, not a racing mind. The reality is that we all disengage sometimes. We all check out emotionally. We all need space. Knowing that can help you offer the kind of compassion you'd want if the roles were reversed. You're not letting people off the hook. You're offering a better way back in, a way that respects both your boundaries and theirs, a way that holds the door open without dragging someone through it. It's also worth noting that leading with curiosity doesn't mean tolerating consistent disengagement without accountability. If someone chronically avoids communication, dismisses your needs, or uses silence as a tool of control, that's a different issue. In those cases, curiosity might evolve into clarity, recognizing what kind of relationship dynamic you're dealing with and deciding how much emotional energy to continue investing. But in healthy mutual connections, temporary disengagement can often be resolved with gentle inquiry, not sharp confrontation. Leading with curiosity is a skill. It requires you to slow down, breathe, and detach from the need for instant resolution. It asks you to listen more than you speak at first, to observe before reacting, to wonder rather than assume, and to remember that most people want to be understood more than they want to be fixed. When you approach someone with that mindset, you're not only handling disengagement better, you're creating a deeper standard for communication in every relationship you have. So instead of pressing for answers, consider making space for them. Instead of jumping to conclusions, ask questions that come from care, not confrontation. Instead of taking the silence as an insult, use it as an opportunity to practice patience and emotional leadership. The way you handle disengagement says just as much about you as it does about them, and choosing curiosity is a choice that always honors connection over control. When someone disengages, it's easy to feel like the only way to regain control is to fight for it, to press harder, talk louder, demand answers, or push for closure. There's a powerful urge to win the moment, to reclaim lost emotional ground by insisting on your perspective or chasing resolution on your terms. But what if the bigger win isn't in proving a point or pulling someone back, but in choosing your peace over the need to be right? What if your calm, not your control, is your true power? Trying to dominate an emotional interaction, especially when someone has already pulled away, usually backfires. It can lead to more resistance, more silence, or more defensiveness. You may win the argument, but lose the connection. You may get the last word, but not the truth. And in the end, you walk away with a hollow kind of victory, one that feels more like exhaustion than empowerment. That's the trap of prioritizing power over peace. It satisfies the ego but starves the heart. Choosing peace doesn't mean avoiding conflict or pretending everything is fine. It means protecting your emotional clarity in the face of confusion. It means recognizing that some moments don't need to be won. They need to be witnessed. That someone pulling away might not need to be pulled back, but rather given space to find their way. It's about recognizing that not all tension requires intervention. Some of it requires stillness. There's strength in not reacting. When disengagement happens, there's a pause in the connection, a moment where everything feels uncertain. That's often when people feel most triggered. The silence can feel like rejection. The distance can feel like disrespect. But if you meet that discomfort with reaction, you only create more chaos. If, instead, you hold your ground with grace, you change the energy of the interaction completely. You're no longer trying to wrestle for control. You're showing that your peace doesn't depend on someone else's presence. There's a misconception that to be strong means to be loud, forceful, or dominant in a conversation. But often, the strongest person in the room is the one who doesn't flinch under pressure, the one who doesn't lash out in frustration, the one who knows their truth and doesn't need to weaponize it to feel secure. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. It's the kind of emotional intelligence that doesn't demand others change in order for you to stay grounded. It's tempting to want the last word, to explain yourself, to clear your name. But in many cases, the desire to be right is a reaction to feeling unseen or misunderstood. When you recognize that truth, you realize that the most powerful thing you can do isn't to insist, it's to let go. Let go of the pressure to fix. Let go of the need to convince. Let go of the belief that every moment must end in perfect resolution. Because often the relationship isn't strengthened by what you say next. It's strengthened by what you choose not to say. When you choose peace, you choose to focus on what you can control, your attitude, your tone, your emotional posture. You're not pretending the disengagement didn't happen. You're simply refusing to let it pull you into a version of yourself that feels reactive or out of alignment. You're showing that your self-worth isn't hanging on the outcome of this moment. That's a deeply powerful stance, not for the sake of pride, but for the sake of emotional sustainability. There are times when silence is louder than shouting, when restraint is more impactful than retaliation, and when stepping back is the clearest sign of strength. Choosing peace means trusting that not every battle is yours to fight, that some things will unfold in time, that people will reveal their capacity or lack of it without you having to push the issue. And in doing so, you get to conserve your energy for the places where your voice truly matters, where your presence is truly respected. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start caring differently. You care in a way that honors both yourself and the other person without compromising your integrity. You care enough to stay calm, even when they check out. You care enough to hold space but not hold guilt. You care enough to express what's real for you, but not in a way that demands a matching response. That's not indifference. It's discipline. There's dignity in walking away from a conversation without escalating it. Dignity in letting silence stand without trying to break it with anxiety. Dignity in being okay with the fact that not everyone will meet you where you are, and not everyone needs to. Sometimes disengagement is not a rejection, it's a redirection. It's showing you where energy no longer flows freely, where effort becomes draining instead of mutual. That's valuable information. And peace allows you to receive it without resentment. The big win is not in dragging someone back into connection. It's in holding the door open while continuing to walk forward. It's in showing that your emotional state is self-sourced, that your balance doesn't rise and fall with the waves of someone else's mood, that even if things remain unresolved, you can remain steady. That's the kind of emotional presence that inspires trust, not just from others, but within yourself. Over time, people notice who keeps their composure in hard conversations, who doesn't overreact, who doesn't manipulate or guilt trip or escalate. Those are the people others feel safe around. And safety is the foundation of every strong relationship. When you choose peace, you become the anchor, not the storm. And whether the other person returns to the conversation or not, you've already made the more powerful choice, one that protects your dignity, your energy, and your sense of self. The deeper truth is this: your peace is not passive, it's active. It takes intention to maintain, it takes courage to choose, and it takes wisdom to know when to engage and when to let go. That's the bigger win, not dominating the moment, but mastering yourself within it, not forcing an outcome, but holding your center no matter what the outcome becomes. Peace isn't weakness, it's the final form of strength.